Hello, enJOYment tribe. I'm so excited to be doing all this, and I'm just hopping on here a little early before Cami jumps on, and she'll be on soon. We're going to talk about how we came to yoga and how it's affected our lives and every aspect of our lives. We'll get into our personal stories, so that should be a fun conversation to have. And I look forward to having those conversations with all of you as we progress through our enJOYment yoga teacher training and everything that you're going to learn in there. And I'm excited to find out if you have a personal practice, or if you're brand new to yoga, or if you've been doing it for 20 or 30 years, or just where you are and what your sort of expectations, for lack of a better word, are for the course, and just all the sharing that's going to happen, and the vision of the longevity of this tribe is something that is really strong inside of me right now. So this is just some extra content for you, and I'll be doing this more often than not to send to you to keep you, keep you motivated and engaged, and give you some ideas of the practical use of yoga in your everyday life, how it becomes a lifestyle versus something that you set aside time for separately. So I'm just noticing Cami is texting me. Oh, no. Right. Okay. So she should be on any minute. And you might hear some vacuuming in the background. Josh actually has a day off, so he's hanging out with Juliet, and he's vacuuming and he's doing housework. So this is it's a good time for me that I get to be in here. He's doing all that stuff. So if you hear some sound in the background, then it just is what it is. It's part of life, as you know, there's always things going on around us besides what we're doing on a regular basis. You can see over my left shoulder, Maharaji and Hanuman. You'll learn more about who they are as we go through the course. If you don't know, some of you have already been through yoga teacher training with me. I think some of you more than once. So you're familiar with some of my stories, and if you're anything like me, I love to hear stories over and over again, especially about yoga and yoga as a lifestyle, because I feel, especially from Ram Dass, who is my teacher, it's resuming now. So now I'm here with Cami.
Hello.
I love that it worked. You never know with technology if it's going to be glitchy.
Yeah.
But anyway, so like I was introducing before Cami got on, that we're going to talk about what brought us to yoga today. And we're going to tell our stories and hopefully ask each other questions if things come up while the other person is talking, to just go a little bit deeper into what brought each of us to yoga and how it's integrated into our lives now, how it just becomes a lifestyle. Like I mentioned earlier in this, Cami, Krishna Das always says that there's no separation between life and spiritual practice. Your life is your practice.
Yeah.
And it's something that you kind of, I didn't even know that was a sentence when I first came to yoga. I just thought yoga was like a physical practice, a long time ago. And thank God, because you'll learn that it did actually help me physically, my physical body, and the pain that I had. But to understand that it was a full lifestyle versus something that you set aside time for to do.
Yeah.
It just, and you do still set time aside for it, but the way that it all sort of integrates into your being, it's everything. Yoga becomes everything. So we're going to kind of touch that, I think, as we talk about our stories and what brought us to yoga. So do you want to go first?
Yeah, sure.
All right.
So, hi everyone. My name is Cami. I'm actually a Joy YTT graduate and a Reiki 1 and 2, the Joy Reiki School 1 and 2 graduate, and working towards my Reiki Master, which I'm very excited about. But yeah, so a big catalyst in my story is that my best friend of 11 years took his own life. And that happened in January of 2017. And I was actually in Florida on an escape from my own life. I was struggling with my own depression, my own anxiety, and I had quit my job, and I had been in Florida staying with family for about 3 weeks. And I got the news that my best friend had committed suicide. And I was not ready for that. You can never be ready for that. And it just rattled me to my core. And I didn't know, I felt like I had no idea what was going on. And it really brought me to a moment of, what the hell am I doing? What is life? What am I doing with my life? And then 3 months later, in March of 2017, my nephew, who was 4 months old, passed away from SIDS. And those things happening back to back really shook me up. And it really got my mind in, what am I doing? What is life? Because this can't be it. Me on an escape to Florida, escaping my life, or thinking I'm escaping my life, can't be it. This isn't what this is about. And so it took me a little bit. I found yoga because one of my friends from work was actually taking yoga classes. And I was like, oh, okay, that's cool. I'm going to go move my body around. Yeah, fun. And so, yeah, cool, whatever that means. Go with my weird hippie friend to a yoga class. Cool. So I started going here and there. I took my first class at Joy in October of 2017. I went back and looked it up. And I was just going every once in a while at that point. And then I started to be like, oh, wow, I'm struggling with grief and trauma, and I'm struggling with numbing myself out from the world. And every time I go to yoga, I feel better. I was like, what a revelation. And it took me another year to really notice how yoga had rearranged my life. I actually started feeling like a human again. I started feeling like a person who mattered. I started having purpose. And
was it again or for the first time?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like the last time I could even trace these feelings of blissfulness and joy and happiness was when I was like a child and didn't know anything, So it did feel like the first time ever, because in this adult form of being lost my whole life, it felt like I was like, when was the last time I was laughing at the sun? Oh, maybe when I was a child and didn't know anything and just ran around like a little cutie, And so, and so I was like, holy shit, pardon my language, but wow, yoga has done something for me. I am moving my body physically, but also the teacher was always putting in these little drops of yeah, come back to your breath. What do you feel in your body? And all these little cues. I was like, hey, I can use this when I'm at work. I'm using this when I'm at home and my sister is stressing me out. And I'm using this when I'm thinking about my friend and my nephew who passed away, and I'm having these large feelings of grief. And I'm coming back to myself. I'm coming into my body and being like, oh my gosh, I feel sad, and it's okay to feel sad. And then at the end of my sadness, I'm like, okay, I feel relief, and I can feel happiness, and I can feel a joy. And so I joined YTT.
Awareness, you were aware.
I was full aware. I didn't know what that word meant.
Yeah.
didn't know that awareness was a word. Body awareness, loving awareness. I didn't know what that meant. And then I joined the YTT, and I was in for an awakening.
With
And
the disclaimer.
with the disclaimer, there was a full disclaimer at the beginning, and it changed my life. It was like a 180. I am now a completely different person than I was in 2016, right before my friend had passed away. And this is me though. You know, it's like I came home to myself. This is my true essence. And I had been living a lie, it seems like. But at the time I was like, oh, this is fun. I'm doing whatever I want. And I think this is what I want to be doing. But of course, if I'm escaping to Florida because I'm depressed, that's not what anybody wants. But I just needed to notice that. I needed to become aware to it. So now here I am 2 years later, and very excited to be now distributing this course to you, because it's just amazing. I'm so excited for your journeys, and I'm so excited to be here with Jen, who was my first, instructor to the real life of yoga. That wasn't just the physical practice where I was hearing these little tidbits of information. She kicked down the door and was like, oh no, yoga is everything, not just when you come in and sit on your mat. So
you guys were getting me when you went through the training. You guys were getting me at a very like powerful time in my life, and so I was just like dumping all that on you. Like as I was learning it, I'm like, here, experience this, experience it now, so you don't have to waste. Not that any time in life is a waste. So you don't have to go through 20 years to, let's cut through, the red tape and get to the core of like the meaning and live life as authentically as possible.
Yeah.
That awareness. Could you mind if I go into our texts and read what I wrote to you the other day?
Yeah. And I just want to say that I feel like you're at another very powerful time in your life.
Yeah. Oh, right. Totally. Yes.
Maybe even more powerful than what you were in when I took the YTT. So I'm very excited for this group to have you in your full power right now. And I also feel like I'm in a very powerful place right now. So
you should hear the way that we talk and the way we text each other. Everyone. It's like we're just like bouncing off the walls, like so happy about life, and you'll learn. And there's a lot of our members that have been through the yoga teacher training, so they're familiar with this, jargon. That even though we're happy, like we're super happy, it doesn't mean we ignore any other part of life. It's all happening and it's all unfolding. I'm trying to find what we were saying because it was great.
Like that's the key to it.
Say it again. You kind of cut out a little bit right there.
Yeah, it's almost like that's the key to the yoga practice, is that, the stereotype and like the big vision of yoga is like, oh, it's calm and it's happy and it's relaxation and it's peaceful. And it is those things. Yeah, and flexibility. It is those things, but it's those things because of the depth of the practice, which isn't just the physical, it isn't just the face of yoga. So it is calming and relaxing, but it's because of everything else that it is, which includes a recognition of the hard feelings. Like I talked about, grief and trauma are huge in my life. And those aren't relaxing and calming and fun. They're painful and they're deep, and there's anger and there's frustration and there's sadness. And it's all of that. All of that is what then brings more ease to your everyday moments, your everyday life. And it weaves in like a braid, in that beautiful way.
What joy is. Like that is the definition of joy. That's why it's the name of my business, is because joy encompasses everything. All the happy, the sad, and the in between. And then the awareness of all that. It really is what it is. Then that's like where the blooming comes from.
Right.
So we were talking about doing this, or maybe we weren't even talking about it. We were just talking about the enJOYment course. That's what it was. And when we first met, that's right. And you're like, I signed up for online YTT in October, then switched to in person. And the first meeting was in February. Oh, because we were saying that had been 2 years since we met.
Yeah.
Which was our 2-year friendiversary on Facebook today.
Wow.
And so I was saying, I remember being in the heart side of the studio and someone walking up the stairs and then hearing someone say, I hear her voice, because like people that take the online training that don't know me, you hear the audios, you see the videos, and you don't always meet me in person or whatever.
Yeah, because I had started the online training. It was October, November. And then I was like, I need the in-person. So I ended up signing up. And I was like leaving the yoga studio because I had just taken class. And I heard your voice in the heart studio. I was like, hey, wait a minute.
I know that voice.
Yeah.
And then I did, and I was like, hi.
Hi.
I want to introduce myself because you don't know it yet, but I'm never leaving. I love it. And I wrote, thank God. And then I said, and then you cried and cried because like the story that you just told of what brought you to yoga. And then you cried and cried. I thought she was going to marry someone that was in the teacher training. I said, and then you began to heal and transform. And whatever. I'm just going to be honest with what I wrote because we're so goofy. And then we farted and sang together. We shared meals and beds and will forever live happily ever after. That's kind of what this does too.
You chose to share that. So good.
Well, I have to, because it's like, let's just bring it down, right? Like, let's bring it. This is like real life. So one of the misconceptions of yoga, and I'll get back on track in a second, is that you become a yogi, you become like this perfect being. And that's not even a real thing. So I'll have a lot of students, or I've had a lot of students over the years, like come and confess to me, like for getting angry or for some kind of way that they think that they're being that's not in alignment with being a yogi. And that's just not a thing. So there's no need. So as you go through this, especially if it's your first time, just remember that as you're learning these things and these ways of being and these practices, you're not becoming something that you're not. You're just becoming, like Cami said, yourself. You're coming home to your heart. So you're born with your personality. You're always going to have that personality, right? And then you're just discovering more and more of who you are, which, innately is like this beautiful, loving person. But that comes out in so many different ways. I mean, it comes out different in everyone. It's not going to be the same. And the beating up of oneself over ways that you think you're acting or thinking or speaking, that's just an opportunity to become aware of that. And if you don't like it, if it doesn't feel like it's part of your core being, your true self, then it's an opportunity to slowly but surely make changes. That's all. And shed. And even you don't really have to try. That's another thing, right? I mean, I think you'll agree with me, is that you don't really have to try, because with the practice and the integration of yoga into your life, things that are not you fade, right? Like,
yeah, I'll touch on that by saying they want to fall away. Like the things that aren't you, the habits that aren't you, the behaviors that aren't you, they don't want to be there. You wants to be you, but we just have these layers and layers and layers of ego, which we'll get into that too, maybe in another video. But we have these layers and layers and layers of the human conditioning and what we're taught, and the ego, which is who we think we are. They want to fall away. They don't want to be there. So doing these practices allows them to shed on their own. But there is a letting go that you have to allow to happen. So it's not a trying. You don't have to be like, I don't want to be this anymore. You don't have to try to not be something. Just let it fall away if it's ready to fall away. And layer by layer, you're going to go through different learnings about yourself, and these different layers are going to shed away.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
So I talk about what brought me to yoga in the yoga teacher training, so I'm not going to go too deep into that, but really, oh man, I feel like the older I get and when I look back at my life way back to when I was a child, like when I can first remember, you know, when I first have memories of being alive, which was, I don't know, maybe 6 or 7 years old. I feel like that's when yoga started, really. But what brought me to the actual physical practice of yoga, which is where I started, was I had low back pain. And it was like chronic low back pain at the age of 21, from, I think, a fall that I had where I probably sprained or even broke my tailbone. I never like got it checked out or anything, but it hurt me for years. And then it kind of set in and I had like this chronic ache in my low back. When I sat down for too long, when I did certain things. And so I started to read about yoga. I had already been studying Buddhism and the Kabbalah and different things that I was interested in because of anxiety that I had and anger that I had. So I was on a path. I mean, I feel like I'd been on a path since I was probably 11 or 12 with a lot of that stuff. And so then I came to yoga. Somehow I came to Kundalini yoga. I'm not really sure how. It was before really the internet. So I don't know. I did not Google like how to cure back pain. I almost said that and I'm like, no, there was internet, but it was dial up and the internet was not full of information like it is now.
The equivalent to that back in your day.
It was like, I don't even know. Maybe I was in a store and there was like a DVD that said yoga for back pain.
A little flyer pinned on the wall.
It could have been. And Amazon existed still too. So anyway, the internet did exist, but it was not like it is now. So I got a video, Kundalini yoga for back pain. And I was in my living room and I talk about the story in the training. You'll hear the whole entire audio of it, but in my living room doing Kundalini yoga. So if you don't know a lot about Kundalini yoga, it's a lot of breathing and breath of fire and weird breathing. Like if you don't know anything about yoga, then you're like, wow, I'm doing the weirdest thing right now. Like, you know, like moving your body and all these and chanting. And it just feels weird when you're alone and it feels weird, period. But when you're brand new to it and you're in your living room doing it alone, it feels even weirder. But I still, for some reason, just kept with it and did it every day. And the back pain went away, like it subsided. There was like a little twinge that never went away until the day that I did 108 sun salutations. And when I got to like 85, something shifted in my body like forever and ever. And that back pain went away forever. But the Kundalini brought me to a place. And like Cami said, it was doing something physically. It was healing my body, but it was like unwinding my anxiety and my anger and bringing awareness to just everything in my life. And simultaneously, I was going through my Reiki training back then. This was probably now 20 years ago. So I was going through my Reiki training and I'd been working on a lot of emotional issues. And so the combination of those two things just kind of like blew me out of the water at that time with awareness. And of course, like this is a trend in my life. Everything I love, I'm like, I have to teach that. So
yeah, exactly.
Not always a good idea, by the way. Some things should be left to hobby. I'm learning that. I've learned that the hard way. But anyway, that's kind of what put me on the yoga path. And you know, I had my Light on Yoga book, the BKS Iyengar book that is part of the training. And that was my Bible. I was like in my living room being like, okay, I'm going to do this pose next. It was not YouTube or anything like that. Or And I didn't go to yoga classes. I didn't even know like how to look up a yoga studio. I don't even know if I knew they existed. I have no idea, but I just knew that I found Kundalini. Then I had light on yoga and I was practicing out of the book and teaching it out loud and just being like, I need to become a yoga teacher. And it ended up, wasn't for a while later, maybe like 8 or 9 years later, I was able to take the training. So anyway, it started as a physical practice, but that physical practice, as much as we joke about it not being important, it's so important because that like wakes you up to your chakra system and the subtle energies in your body and how your body and your emotions are connected and how everything happens in your body first, not in your mind, but in your body. Your body knows things even days before they're going to happen for some reason, right? There's like this magnetic field and magnetism of synchronicity in life that happens in our bodies first. So when you're feeling really crazy or you're feeling super sad or you're feeling anxious, like outside of your normal anxiety, if you kind of track that, you'll be able to link it with life events that happen. So even with you being in Florida, interestingly, you went to Florida to escape.
Yeah.
You know, and then while you were there, your friend took his life. Like, so your body knew.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And that was a huge thing that I, you know, worked through and thought about and considered was that the state of mind that I was in when I was here was not good. And I don't know how I would have, or if I would have been able to handle the news the way that I did if I hadn't gone to Florida. And I think that there was something in me that was like, you need to go be somewhere and like gather yourself almost. Like there was a knowing in my body.
Preparation.
Yeah. Like my body was just like, you need to be somewhere else than where you are right now. And you know, I say escape like it's a bad thing because I was sort of escaping my life, but sometimes we do need to escape, for lack of a better word. We do need to be somewhere where we can rejuvenate and rest. And I just didn't have any awareness yet, so I didn't know what I was doing. But when we do it with awareness, it's helpful, you know?
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
So I had
It's almost mandatory.
It is. It's definitely mandatory. It's yeah, it's a necessity.
It's an escape to like drink and vacationing is like vacating your life.
Right.
But you can also go on retreat. And that's when you can find that space. So we need to create the space in order to empty and allow other things. I mean, that's when the real healing begins, is when you get quiet like that.
Right. So my body knew that I needed this, but I didn't know yet. I was just like, I am sad and I'm going crazy. I need to like go. And yeah, and it happened while I was away, but I was like, at that point, I was 3 weeks in Florida and like got plenty of vitamin D, plenty of time by the ocean. And this was in January. So obviously at home, it's like snowstorms and like it was crazy. And I was like, okay, like I can breathe again, like I'm feeling good. And then I got that news. So it was like I had built myself up to a place where I was able to receive what was coming next. And it wasn't just that news. It was like, hey, your life's about to change. Something big is happening in your life and we're waking you up. And it's just so happened to be with this event.
That's part of the ebb and flow, like the contraction and expansion. It's another thing that you'll become aware of, is that there's a lot of contraction, which is that hibernation time and that preparation time, and then expansion. It's not always super painful, but I think in the beginning of the journey, a lot of the times, I know for me, for you, and a lot of people that I've heard from, it is more painful in the beginning because we have so much that we have to work through, especially depending on what time in your life you're coming to yoga. You know, if you're 40, 50, 60, even 70 years old, just coming to yoga, you have a whole lifetime of things that, you know, brought you to this place. So the expansion and the contraction can feel huge at first and almost overwhelming, right? There are times where you're just like, I need a break from the spiritual practice, right? But then you realize that it's not really true. You just need to create more space and allow, like there's so much just allowing, and things happen when you don't try. It just comes back to that. Things happen when you don't try. But I love that. So it's like was preparing you for that. And the other thing too, that I'm sure many of you can relate to is what Cammie said, like she felt like she was losing her mind. That's a lot of what I hear and what I experienced personally as well at when I came to my yoga teacher training, where you almost, there's something that happens in your life, you know, an awakening. I think it's a spiritual awakening, and a spiritual awakening is not an instant thing that you hear about. It doesn't happen like, oh my God, I'm suddenly enlightened. A spiritual awakening is a hard, painful journey into yourself. And so you have a choice. You're always given choices in life of what road you want to take. And it's, I mean, whatever road you take is okay. It all leads to the same place eventually. But when you come to those points where life becomes overwhelming and you're filled with anxiety and all these different feelings, and maybe you feel like you're losing your mind a little bit, many people, and if you're one of them, it's like no judgment here whatsoever, but many people might turn to medicate. It's scary. So they might turn to medication. They might turn to numbing. They might turn to ignoring. And then other people, and which is going to be most of you here too, you might have tried both. You turn to what you think is your soul and spiritual and a path. You're like, there's got to be more. Like Cammie said, there's got to be more to this life, right? Like this, all these symptoms, and all symptoms ever are signals from our body, again, telling us, listen. And when we don't listen, the signal is just going to get louder and louder. And so there's always that choice. And so we're making that choice right now into ourselves, you know. And like I said, if you take medication for anxiety or depression, it's totally fine. You can do that and make the choice to go within. And who knows, over time, you might not need it anymore. You might always need it. That's not a thing that I'm talking about. It's just the choice to choose your heart and to learn your purpose and your innate qualities, like what we're born with, which is really unconditional love. I mean, that's what I think. Everything always leads to love. Can't ignore it.
Yeah, and I just want to backtrack for a moment to when we were talking about the expansions and contractions and how the message, way back to the message I sent where you were like, and you cried and cried. And yeah, that first weekend of the yoga teacher training, I don't think I stopped crying for 3 days. I cried the whole time because I was like, holy shit, all of this stuff, it just needs to come out, because I was holding on to it so hard for so long, including, you know, those two losses I had, but also everything in my whole life. You know, it's like trauma can be that time in 3rd grade where you spilled ice cream on your shirt and someone made fun of you, and then you were forever worried about eating ice cream in public, you know, and then it's snowballs. That's a made-up story. But then it snowballs, and it's like, yeah, we've held on to these things that have hurt us in whatever way they hurt us for so long, for our whole lives. It doesn't matter what event it was. It doesn't matter how it happened.
Still has an impact.
It's still impactful. Yeah, it's still there. And we hold these things in our bodies, which is why the physical practice is important. And then it ties into our mind, our emotional and mental bodies, and then our spiritual bodies, which all are unconditional love. They all want unconditional love. They all are unconditional love. They want us to uncover that. Yeah.
Right.
Which is what yoga does. It uncovers what's already there, which is the unconditional love.
And remembering that, you know, it's a remembering process. We're remembering who we are, and releasing the ego. We never fully get rid of the ego. If you do, let me know. You'll be a very high saint if you release the ego. But one thing that just came up when you were saying that I want to remind everyone to do, and you should write this down, because it's one thing that we all hear so much, and I'm sure you have participated in this language at one point, probably recently, because of how chaotic the world is right now, is when you're talking about your own pain, you say, but I know other people have it much worse than me. So you minimize your own pain. This is not a comparison act that we're doing. Of
Right.
course, people have it worse. Of course, people have it better. It doesn't matter. When we're in this container, in this situation with one another, and even in your life, you should give yourself the opportunity to grieve whatever it is, be it the ice cream on your shirt and someone laughing at you in third grade. It doesn't matter. You don't have to minimize the situation that has caused you trauma. And you don't, and we do minimize it by saying that, but so many other people have it worse. So I should just be grateful for what I have. You know, there's a kernel of truth in that. Of course, we should be grateful in every moment and happy with all that we do have in our lives. But that doesn't mean that we haven't been hurt, even if it doesn't look like, you know, we're homeless and begging for food. Like, you don't have to make that comparison. You can still have ultimate compassion for the suffering of others and ultimate compassion for your own suffering.
Right.
I mean, so write that down and listen to your language. So when you're in this course and when you're reading and you're listening and you're doing all these things, you're doing the assignments, hopefully, I feel like everybody's going to want to try some of the assignments, at least the journaling.
I recommend it.
Yeah. Right. No pressure at all, because this is obviously a no pressure course, and do it for your own enjoyment and reflection. But it's just an opportunity for you to recognize outside of this, much like the physical practice, and Cami talked about this before, is taking what you learn when you're on your mat or when you're in one of our meetings or when you're in doing stuff within the training, taking what you learn and applying it to your life outside of that. So maybe you come on here and you're feeling all loving and you're feeling all like, I'm living in my purpose, and you feel strong, right? And then you walk out the door and you turn back into this wilted flower, right? Don't. Bring it right in, you know, thread it through into your regular life, because there's no separation and you don't have to dull yourself, and you'll start to feel the integration and begin to notice your thoughts and your words. And you'll start to fine tune that. I feel like it's a lifetime practice, but you start to fine tune it more and more of, how do I speak? You know, how do I minimize myself all the time? How do I minimize others? And how can I rearrange my words to reflect what I feel when my ego is set aside? That's a huge thing.
And as you hone in on that, you know, that's the thing about how they all tie together. The physical practice is good because you're able to hone in on your sensations, your natural sensations, and then your sensations of when you're feeling an emotion. So like anger or joy, happiness, fear, whatever. As you hone in on your experience with your physical body, you're able to notice when something like that's coming up. But you're also able to hone in on how you're moving through life. You're able to hone in on like, oh, I just said something and it kind of made me feel bad about myself. Next time I'm going to say it a different way, or maybe not at all, depending on what you said. You know, you hone in on these little things, and that's what the practice of weaving what you learn on your mat into your everyday life, you know, they're attached, they're together. So you take those little things and you're like, oh, wow, I am feeling a fluttering in my gut or in my heart, okay, I'm going to take a deep breath, because on my mat, when I breathe deeply, I calm down a little. And then you do that when you're in line at the grocery store and there's a million people in line and you're, feeling the energy of the whole building. You can take a minute, like, oh, okay, it's all right, I can wait. All right, here I am, I'm waiting. And then now you're waiting. You're not, oh, this line needs to go, or, oh, that guy is looking at me and like I feel awkward, and like whatever, whatever you're
Right. And the tendency to like want to jump on your phone and hide and
yeah,
yeah.
right. Yeah, or it's whatever anxieties come up in whatever place that you are, you're like, oh, my feet are on the ground. I can feel the earth beneath me. Gravity is doing its job. I can breathe. Wow, it feels good that my breath goes all the way into my belly. Okay, here I am. And then here you are, and then you're just here. Am I
Have
that
both.
makes sense?
Wicked, yes. No, yeah, because so you're talking about having both. So you're
Right.
in whatever situation that's causing you to, pull your shoulders up around your ears and scrunch your face and all these different things. And you remember your practice, your physical practice, your breath. So it doesn't mean that the store becomes less chaotic, but you become less chaotic. So you have
Right.
both. You
Yeah.
have the tools to come back to the present and then and also observe what's happening around you. That's all. You don't always have to react to your environment, both internally or externally. You observe and you witness instead of react.
Right.
We could just go on. It's already been the time. Like we've been doing this. It is. All right. So the next conversation that you're going to hear Cami and I have is going to be about the ego and a fun little practice. I'm going to use the word challenge, but I'm going to have a different word for it because challenge is so ego driven. You have this no ego challenge.
Yeah, what?
Opportunity, invitation. But we'll talk about that in the next little video, this bonus material, which we hope that you enjoy. So see you at the next meeting. And Cami, I'm just going to pause our recording so we can chat for a minute, but we'll just say bye.
Bye, everyone, and we'll see you soon.
All right.